Hey everyone, it's Jeff. As we continue along on our podcast, Lora and I would love to touch on some topics that are near and dear to your hearts. So if you have anything that you want to hear us talk about, if you want to get Laura's unique perspective on some of the things that you might be dealing with or some things that your loved ones might be dealing with, we would love to hear about those things. Please send us an email. mail.sowhatwhocares@gmail.com is the best way to do that. Or you can send us something on social media through our DMs or a comment or something like that. But we'd love to hear from you. It's important to us to make sure that we are touching on the things that are important to you. Please, again, reach out to us. And while you're there, subscribe, like, and comment. Okay, enjoy the episode. This is So What Who Cares with Laura McCarville and me, Jeff Kolaski. Join us as we explore practical insights for an impractical mind. So last episode we talked about informal practices or informal, how do you say it? Practices, should we say
Yeah,
that?
it's practices.
Informal practices with regard to mindset, mindfulness. And today we want to get into some of those formal practices. So we talked about things like wiggling your toes, take a pause.
Those are all informal.
Right. The bold, just breathe, observe, listen, and then decide. So let's talk about let's be a little more formal. I should have worn a tie.
Well, good news is you don't have to wear a tie
To be formal?
To be formal.
Okay.
And again, everyone has kind of different language. Different teachers are going to teach different things. Formal meditation or mindfulness practice. What I could say longer, but people go, ooh, right? Like, I don't want to do that any longer.
Right.
But I'm speaking more to when mindful meditation, when we move from those little micro mindful moments to actually developing this sitting practice of mindfulness where we sit longer.
What does that look like?
Yeah. So, what I used to think it was super upright.
We're doing this.
This is where I bought the cushion, stack ankle in front of ankle and upright.
Should I cross my legs?
I mean, this is the thing that it's taught in formal practices where
I'm going to do it.
Can you?
Can you? I can do this.
I mean, we run out of room in our narrow chairs. But what happens is we get really caught up in the okay, well, that's going to hurt with time because your knees are higher than your hips. So it's not going to be
fall asleep.
yeah, look at your ankles. No, this is not a sustainable seat, but we get so caught up in the look of it.
I feel like I'm being judged a little right now and how I've decided to sit.
But I will tell you, you can't sustain that seat for very long.
You want to bet? I'm going to hold this for the rest of the episode. I'm just joking. I'm sorry.
But really what happens then is the whole, let's say we set the timer for 20 minutes, the whole time your hips are uncomfortable, you're caught in the body thing.
That's what I'm thinking about.
And my ankle is falling asleep. And then so there is a thing of can I set myself up? And depending on what's happening in the body. So when I came into these practices, I had a back injury. So I couldn't sit upright. I needed to lean against the wall. And in some teachers, in some communal spaces, that's really judged. And it's really and then you're finding well, I can't even go to that, a meditation studio because they're judging me because I have to use a wall, right? So that is what happens. So my approach, again, because I've worked with so many people, and you can access a more formal practice, meeting yourself where you're at. So if you need to use the wall, use the wall.
Yeah.
And then, but you say it like that, but I'm telling you, it gets
oh, I'm sure. And that's I think why I said it like that, because I know.
Yeah, it gets real judged.
There's so many, even just what I teased about, I feel judged with how I'm sitting. Like, but that's what happens. Like, I know that with, you know, my wife, she has told me often that like I love the art and the practice of yoga, but I don't like going to most studios because I don't feel like I'm good enough at it. I don't feel like I have, and I feel like people are judging me for it, and they're sometimes they're saying things or whatever, and I just don't feel like I can,
Come enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and that's I think why I reacted how I did, because it seems like it should be so.
I know, and any I was just talking with a close girlfriend this morning about this. Like any lineage of anything, like when you're searching for something, you find it, and then that knowledge makes you feel better than you did before and
Mhm.
better than everyone else. And then you get
Mm,
kind of caught in this hierarchical, like
yeah.
pompous thing. And that happens across
Yep.
not just spiritual practices, learning, like it just
Everything.
is, right? The ego is going to come in pretty hard and
Yep.
be like, I'm better. We recreate those hierarchical systems over and over and
Yep.
over because it's the water we swim in.
Yep.
So, why I teach it now, um, the formal meditation, mindful meditation practices in a more relaxed way, isn't because I wouldn't, I would take time to set the body up so that you weren't distracted
Right.
by the thing, which means you might need the wall. But it also means at some point you may not need to be leaned up against the wall because you've built the back strength to hold your posture, right?
Mm,
So letting yourself also evolve. Um, it can be seated. Like I said, mine started by I was in bed. So
mhm.
I wasn't seated, and that was okay. That was enough. Um, and so what we move towards is, can we set the body up in a way that's sustainable for more than 30 seconds? Now, if you find yourself in a position and you're like, and again, we're talking like a seated meditation. Now, you can sit in a chair, feet on the ground. No,
If you
my
can
feet don't
reach.
touch the ground here. But, and this goes with kids too. If
Mhm.
your feet don't touch the ground, proprioception means where you're at in space.
Mhm.
You will be wiggling. This is why little kids who are
Yeah.
wiggly in their chairs at school, give them something to put their feet on
Mm.
and they'll sit a little more still. Not that
Yeah.
I'm for like
Yeah.
sitting still, but we want to give, we want to set the body up for, we want to set it up for success so
Mhm.
you can be here. So it might be in a chair, feet on the ground, an upright spine, but not like an upright spine is an awake spine, but not upright and uptight,
Mm.
right? Like we don't need to be
At attention.
rigid. We
Yeah.
don't want to practice being rigid um, in our things,
Mhm.
right? So watch where we get stuck,
Mhm.
is what I would say, and just do the thing. Now, what is the thing of a formal practice? When I say formal mindfulness practices, really what I'm speaking to is putting in a little bit more time,
Mm.
and not just putting in the time, finding yourself in that seat of observer, working with what's coming up. Ah, the mind wanders off, come back, and bringing yourself back
Mhm.
into that seat of observer or awareness with some care, right? With a attitude of kindness and like you would. So if you were teaching a puppy to sit
Mhm.
and the puppy ran off, and you'd say, "Come on, come back, try again."
Mhm.
That's like essentially what
Gotcha.
we're doing.
Yeah.
Why? What's the get? The get is that you, again, if it's taught with some compassion,
Mhm.
that we have
Can I
access.
ask you something real
Yeah.
quick? The last couple of times, like, you've wanted to say compassion, you've hung up on the word. Is there it's just an observation.
I feel like I can also just use that word so much.
Is
But
that
there's
going
also kindness. There's also care and tender, and
you're afraid of making it a beaver word?
I'm afraid of making it a beaver word.
Okay. Fair. Sorry,
And I
continue.
don't, because I
It's
think
a great
compassion is
word,
such an
yeah.
important
Part of what
human
yeah.
experience. Like
Yeah.
it's so what's missing is compassion for
Mhm.
self and compassion for others. Um,
I don't think that you're making it a beaver word. I
Good.
think it's just fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, keep
So
say it
it's
loud and
that
proud. Yeah,
compassion practice with self,
yeah.
like the present moment with some compassion. And then the awareness of like, whoa, there's more than just this acute moment of my, ankle or my knee or my
Mhm,
hip or the itch in my head. there's also something else here. And I'm learning to be with that. Oh, and here's this pattern of being me,
Mhm.
this habit of being me that's showing up. And I can meet that with some tenderness too. And so I think the science shows like at 11 minutes, there's a significant change in the brain um,
11 minutes
of
of
sitting.
just sitting.
All right. So when I work with people who say to me, I have a meditation practice, um, and I say, well, what kind or what are you doing? And it's guided. Okay. I love guided
Mhm.
meditations. I love active imagination through Jung. I love that aspect. That's not the same as a silent sit.
Mm.
It's not, because and it's not that there's distraction, it's a gateway to this
Mhm.
other thing of, can I be with myself and what's happening?
Yeah. What happens when you turn that sound off? When you turn that voice off?
Mhm.
That might be what you need to work with, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it just in the if we're working to build a muscle of pause and access compassion, then this is one of those ways there. With that being said, so if we go back to like what does that look like? Or it's not for everyone
Mm.
straight out of the gate. And I say that because some acute mental health crises don't call for meditation
Mhm.
and mindfulness. It's not one thing isn't everything. Everything isn't one thing.
Sure.
So it's not going to solve everything.
Yeah.
Um, what I'm what I do teach is this trauma inclusive lens of, can you learn to be with yourself in a little bit of silence, with a little bit of compassion, and meet what arises. And whatever is coming up, eventually what does happen is we start to have a more vast experience of being.
Mm.
And so when we learn to hold it more like water, and we learn to hold our experience of being a little bit softer,
Mhm.
and life around begins to shift in the way of time, how fast it goes, in the way of presence and what we have access to,
Mhm.
in the way of even like sweet memories that we go like, oh, I can actually remember those moments.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because I was there for it because I had trained myself to be
Mhm.
present, right? So
Yeah.
typically in the beginning, what happens when we come to sit on a chair with our feet on the ground, or we sit crisscross applesauce
Mhm.
with our hips lifted, our knees below our hips, using a wall, whatever it is that you find yourself, or if you're lying down.
Mhm.
You set your timer, and it might be like 3 minutes. Now, what's interesting is 3 minutes is harder for a lot of people than 7 minutes because it
Mm.
takes
Why?
it takes time to settle down, right? So if you imagine like muddy water, right? And you shake it
Yeah.
up, and it's like all cloudy, and then the mud starts to settle down.
Mhm.
And then like as soon as settles down, people bounce out. It's like let it settle down.
And
And
then
then
s
and then you
Hmm.
find like, oh, whoa, whoa. And, like, there's some space that opens up
Yeah.
here.
Okay.
So sometimes if you've been like, I wanna start a meditation practice, I wanna move into like mindful meditation. So meditation is single point of focus in general. So like a candle, a breath, a mantra. It's something that we're focusing our mind to. Um, that's meditation. And mindful meditation, we sort of hold it a bit looser in that seat of awareness. Now, we have something like breath or a mantra or a candle. And we also work with what's here,
Mhm.
whatever's arriving to this moment. So if I'm having thoughts, right, that are coming in, and I'm like, "Oh, why did that blah, 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 blah."
Mhm.
Can I also not okay, focus on your breath. Don't think about that thought. I'm inviting us to be that's a great practice.
Yeah.
And can we go, "Oh, I'm observing how I'm running down that track again. I'm chasing that. Oh, okay. There I go." And you become the observer of that
Mhm.
thinking, the observer of that sensation. So my ankle is, you're sitting and, oh, my ankle, I want to move my leg. Okay, I can be with that. Maybe about the third time of my leg needing to stretch out. then I'll stretch out my leg intentionally and move it and then bring it back in.
Mhm.
Versus, oh, I didn't even feel my head itch, right?
Mhm.
And then we go, okay, my head's itching, and we can name it. That's a solid
Mhm.
thing, itching head. Hi, kitty. And then we do that, the itching head thing.
Mhm.
And then maybe we reach up and itch the head, or we notice that sensation has changed.
Right.
Something else has happened. So when we move into formal practices, it's not to get righteous and uppity.
Yeah, I feel like when you talk about that, what my brain does
Mm-hmm.
is overthinks it like crazy.
Oh, sure.
It goes, okay, I'm in an MRI and I cannot move. That's where I go. When you tell me that,
Oh,
I go,
you're trapped in the, yeah, that
well,
sounds
no,
terrifying.
well,
Yeah.
let me clarify maybe. I've had one MRI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't move, right? It's going to screw up the test.
And you're saying
And
that when I'm telling you about formal practices, it brings that same feeling of an MRI?
no, so what I did when I was told, try not to move as much as you can, I said, I will not move at all. I, no matter what happens, I'm not moving.
You said that to yourself?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not moving. I don't care
I
if
got this.
I got this, right? But
Put that
regardless of,
atlas.
right, regardless of what I was feeling in that, I'm going, nope, I'm going to sit with this pain. I'm going to sit with whatever. But I was pretty non compassionate with myself.
Mm.
With, I'm not like, you might as well not even put that little squeeze, like, help me out button in here because I'm not going to use it. I'll freak out before I use that thing. That's my stubbornness coming out in that. So when you're talking about this meditation practice, my my gut goes, I would have such a hard time being compassionate enough with myself to go stretch your leg out and then bring it back in, or sit with the head itching for a moment and then just itch your head.
So why do you think we do that? Why do you think there is that thing of like listen, observe, right? Like feel, oh, okay, this is what's happening now. Okay. I can go ahead and move and oh, okay.
Mhm.
Why what are we building in there?
Mm.
You don't have to. I mean,
Yeah.
what we're building in is a pause
Mhm.
to response. We're building in something. But if I were to say, use your willpower, shut it down, overcome sensation, don't even like what we're building in there is rigidness,
Mhm.
right? We're reinforcing the habit of being you,
Yeah.
which isn't great. And there are times in which you're not in an
Right.
MRI machine.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's why you practice it, is
Mhm.
because maybe if I need to move my leg, I could move my leg and that's okay. It doesn't mean I'm failing.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I think, the the whole, I guess, crux of what I'm talking about is there's something in me personally. I'm not, and I'm
Hmm.
sure I'm not the only one, but
Hmm.
um, there's something in me that says I want so desperately to do this the right way that I'm going to overthink it. I'm going to be so rigid with myself that it's going to be hard for me to actually get out of that practice
Yeah.
what I need to.
It's so curious because
So
if I were to bring in like 25 teachers, they would all teach this very differently,
yeah, I'm
depending
sure.
on lineage and their teachers.
Hmm.
And the thing that's so curious about it is that we will seek the teacher that reinforces the
Yeah.
thing. So you would probably, not saying you would, but let's say someone who had similar
Hmm.
stuff they were working with might find a teacher that reinforces that rigidness.
Hmm.
So then they would be like, wow, I'm really doing a good job. I got this on lock. I shut it down. I'm
Hmm.
mastering. And your teacher would be like, look at you. You
Hmm.
didn't move at all.
Yeah.
You're doing such a good job. Way to get the work done.
Right.
And then we're repeating, we're just
Yeah.
repeating the pattern of being you, right?
Right.
Which is okay again, because who you are is beautiful. Um,
Unless it's
and
not.
and there's maybe something else to learn
Hmm.
in the way, can I be a little softer with myself and know that's okay?
Right. And I think, in that's something I'm proud of myself about, that I can see, like, I know that there's no it doesn't help me to be that rigid with myself. That's not, I want the challenging teacher. I want somebody to say, "Jeff, let's think about that like a different way." What I often think about is, well, if your wife or your daughter was doing that to themselves, how would you respond to that? Well, I would want them to be easier on themselves. I'd want them to say, "Give yourself some grace, some time," whatever.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and this is what's so fun about teaching so many different people is some people do need a more rigid container,
mm,
right? Like you actually don't have to wiggle and shake and move and itch every itch and
mhm,
like you actually need someone to hold the container a little tighter for you
okay.
so you can develop that side of like I can be with this.
I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I'm speaking to is those who are rigid need
Mhm,
a little bit of ease in the practice.
mhm.
And those who are I don't like that word wishy-washy, but
Yeah,
like those who are like porous around
yeah.
that, like I don't and don't have the
I can't sit
belief.
with it. I
Yeah, like
can't be,
it
yeah.
like has to build like if they're building resiliency, not tolerance, not the same,
Mhm,
but like to be with like, ooh, wow, yeah, this is and I can be sweet with myself in
mhm,
it. And know that I'm not like uncomfortable suffering. Yeah, suffering. You're just uncomfortable. You're
mhm.
like not dying here. It's okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay. There's a difference.
Mhm,
And and again, we come back to like having some solid teachers, community care, communal spaces, and that can be available online in online
mhm.
places for sure. There's so many great spaces for that. One-on-one work. Um, and you know,
Yeah.
here you just hearing like, oh, I can have some insight to myself and what I need.
Mhm,
Maybe I do need to be a little bit, hold myself a little bit more in those shapes for a little longer, that place for a little longer, that seat for a little longer.
mhm.
Um, Once we've established like what we're like the intention, I think is really important too. And that's like this thing of the heart to drop back into the heart, out of the head and into the heart, into this place so that the heart's leading life. Um, then we look at like, well, how long are we gonna be there? Right. And so sometimes 3 minutes, sometimes 5 minutes again. Trust me, if you're like 3 minutes sucked, yep, you're doing it right. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 11 minutes, maybe
Yeah.
20 minutes. Um, Most people I work with are householders. They're not living in caves, of
Mhm.
course. And so 20 minutes is typically, sometimes people do 30 minutes twice a day. It really is what is happening in the day. I'm not a rigid person
Right.
around those things. What I do hope in a formal practice and why I encourage, I just was working with someone this week and I said, I think it's time to try silent meditation. And, it was like,
Mm,
because there is so beyond like the, oh, whoa, here are my patterns. You get to like take those tinted glasses off that we've talked about. And it's so beautiful. It can be to be like, wow,
mhm.
okay, I'm not those things.
Right.
I'm not those things that I thought I was. I'm over here observing that stuff, but it's not even who I am.
Mhm.
We get to tap into the essence of who we are, and hold ourselves. And then by holding ourselves and hold others with a lot more compassion and
Mhm.
tenderness.
When I when I was in the Navy, I was dabbling with writing some music,
Hmm.
and I never did anything with that. But, um, I wrote some songs and whatnot, and I remember I wrote this song because it had dawned on me at one point that I feel like a lot of the world, a lot of us, a lot of people are afraid of silence
Mm.
and being in that silence, because what you're speaking to is what happens when all the noise shuts off. The point of that song was the music of the world, the music of the is a lot better than the music that we make. Now, I was pointing that more toward we don't always have to have a song on in the background. We don't always have to be, that sort of thing. But it's kind of the same concept, and can you be with yourself for a little while, and what does that do to you? And I completely agree that when you can sit with that, and it does feel like you've taken some sort of a veil off, like, oh, this is what the world is, this is what I am, this is what's happening around me. It's not all like a manufactured, like it is a little bit of a relinquishment of control that I know I strive for, is that control, right? I know that, so I try to be conscious about it. So and it does feel nice when I can give that away for a
Mm.
little while. So that's what resonates with me about what you're saying. I see the benefit of something guided, because if you just don't know what you're doing, or you feel like you need some assistance getting, I mean, we've done them on this
Yeah,
show.
it's
So,
tra it's someone taking your brain and
yeah,
training it to
yeah.
something. This is quite different, and I'd say, maybe even in the beginning, if you're someone who's like, "I can't sit in silence because it activates
Mhm,
historical trauma and it's too activating." Well, yeah, okay, then put on some binaural beats or put on some music in the background
mhm,
and start there without any words. You know, there's also this thing of like, if I were to sit here in this idea of silence, I can hear the sizzle of my, sparkling water over here.
mhm,
I can hear the kitty cat. I can hear there's sounds, and then we go like, look how I'm bouncing around to all these sounds,
mhm,
and there's so many, the ticking of a clock, right? And it's just to be a little curious with.
mhm.
So, um, you
Yeah,
know,
none of us have ever actually been in silence.
right, it just
It
doesn't
doesn't
exist, and then
exist,
this thing
right.
inside, and then
Yeah.
your heartbeat, and the swallowing,
Not
and
to mention the tinnitus that I have in my ears,
do
that's
you
just,
have tinnitus?
oh, Laura. Yeah.
Oh, man, I
Yes.
got some thoughts on that. That is
Okay.
yeah,
Screaming all the time. Yep.
ah, that's interesting.
Mhm. Anyway,
Yeah, I know some people who've had it and have treated it, that's tough. Sorry.
yeah.
it's hard. It's a
It can
hard
be,
one. It
yeah.
can be, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
White noise is a good thing for
mhm,
that. White
mhm,
and brown.
mhm. And so, like, in that case, like, okay, so if that is what is gives you access to become the observer of the internal thing happening of your and to train the mind to be in the present moment or to come back here and be here and observe
Mhm,
what's happening now. um how I really like the idea of like we'll get distracted and move into forgetting what we're doing and mind wandering, and then we come back and we get distracted. Oh, here's itching. Oh, my mind starts to wander around and I'm forgot. Oh, I'm meditating. That's right. Come back. We kind of have this little pattern we do. Boredom is something that comes up.
mhm,
Sleepiness comes up. So I share that because if you're like, I'll try this on, this whole silent kind of
mhm,
meditation in the container in which I'm talking about it, and you find that you're tired. Yep, because we've trained ourselves the only time we stop moving is when we go to bed. The only time it's quiet is when we go to bed. So your brain's been trained to get sleepy,
mhm,
right? Kiddos I work with will be like, "This is so boring. I'm bored," and I'll say, "Well, are you bored or are you calm?" Because sometimes calm feels really boring. And we can code it as like danger, danger, right?
mhm.
So we start to go like, ooh, yeah, boredom's here, and that's okay too. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my teacher said, if you're like, oh, I gotta call so and so back, and you're sitting and you're holding the space for yourself in this kind way, and oh, I gotta call him back. Oh, I got to call back. Just get up and go make the call. Come back to it. Right? Like,
If there's something that you're having trouble pushing
right.
out of your head,
And
yeah.
some people, I'll even say, have a notebook there. Write the note down that, right, and then come back. Oh, I got to do this thing. Come back.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes I found some some of the most clearing and like calming or maybe not calming, but yeah,
yeah.
calming practices for me. Get it out of my head.
Oh,
Write it
yeah.
down.
Oh, writing.
Write it down or
Mm-hmm.
speak on it, or if you have someone that you try, like my wife, like, let's speak about that for a minute,
Mm-hmm.
and now I all of a sudden I feel better.
I
I'm not,
know.
or
Get
write
it.
it down. Like, that was a big one that my therapist helped me discover, because I didn't know that was something that I needed in that moment. Like,
Oh, the presence practice of, I
oh
think they
yeah,
call it, there's a book called The Presence Practice, maybe, where you just like write and write and write for 10 minutes.
yeah, just barf it out of your,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever's coming.
Yeah.
I think I may have spoke to this before, but I've also found that if I write it out in cursive, it scratches
Mm.
something else in my brain too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the artistic side of the brain as well as the brain dump side.
Mm-hmm.
So it did something for my nervous system where it just brought me down.
You
Like,
want me to tell you?
please.
Yeah, that cursive writing is rhythm.
Mm,
When I was learning cursive, I had this mean nun who was my teacher,
mm,
and I couldn't get the L, and she said, "Sing Humpty Dumpty," and so it was Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, and it was like this very rhythmic way.
mhm.
And said that was not her being mean; that was actually her being nice. But what she was speaking to was like there's rhythm in cursive writing, and we move into like a more right
Mm,
brain, and we find rhythm in cursive. So
yeah.
yeah, and what do we know about rhythm? Calming.
Tell me, yeah.
Yeah. So a little bit, it's almost like rocking yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. So formal meditation
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean um, rigid and sticky and perfection. And it doesn't mean it has to look like a cover of some sort of, Psychology Today magazine. Um,
Yeah.
so if you are having questions, if you do want to know more, like feel free to reach out to me, because
Yeah.
so many people, if you're saying I'm not good at it, yep, I don't like how it feels. Maybe, and maybe some of them you will like.
Mm-hmm.
You don't practice it for this is the big one, is that you don't practice formal meditation, mindfulness practices, this kind of longer sit because of what happens right there.
Mm-hmm.
You practice it because of how it leaks into your life. And that's the exciting, that's the beauty of it.
The more work that I do here with myself, on myself, opens me up for what else is happening around me.
Yeah, and you know how I feel about that word, the work. So it's not even work. It's like the more awareness I have of myself. Again, you can use your words. I just don't use the word work because
I'm
it
open to,
was so like
yeah,
it got really weaponized, and
yeah,
a lot of
I can see that. Yeah.
even therapeutic language gets like really
Yeah.
so
Language is such.
oh,
We should
I
talk
know,
about
and
that
I
sometime.
trip on it hard, and it gets
So do I.
annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to even do that.
Yeah.
Because I'm not inviting anyone to do the work.
Yeah.
I'm inviting, like, here's another thing you could try on in this practice of what I love using is the word individuation through Jung, of like becoming who you are. This thing that wants to come through you, that is here emerging from the heart, that we know that you're breathing and you're meant to be here because of that, and you're right here right now. What is this thing? Not what you've been told you are, not family and not your child self-identity, but like, what is this thing? And through inquiry and awareness, this thing gets to